Mr. Sullivan.
Mr. Jackson, I think you're in a warm place today.
I'm in a warm place. Some would say a hot place. And
yeah,
you?
Well, actually, we got home last night from Phoenix. And Phoenix yesterday, I think, was like 105-ish, in that neighborhood, sort of 105. And got back to Toronto, and it was 76, and it felt very good.
Oh, perfect. I missed, I was in Toronto for a month, six weeks altogether, before, if you count the 2 weeks before I went to London and Amsterdam, and then a month right after that, and it was just delightful. I mean, so great. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I love that.
Yeah, it's hard for me to remember summer that's been so consistently great weather for such a long stretch. And we spent 2 weeks at our lake cottage, and we just had marvelous weather. You had, in each of the weeks, we had about a 3-hour rain period where it just poured and poured and poured. But it's kind of like one of those rains that really gets rid of the mugginess, and then when it dries out, then it's very sharp and clear, and then you don't have anything for 4 or 5 days. It's just really,
it was perfect.
Clear, clear, bright weather. Yeah.
And how was
something
Phoenix?
To be said? I liked Phoenix. We were at a global hip hop conference at our hotel, and they had I would say late-ish teenagers, probably 15 to 18 teenagers from 53 countries, and out of every 100 that you would see, at least 3 of them were talking to each other. The other 97 being in Cloudlandia.
Of course. Now, where's your spot in Phoenix now?
At the Arizona Grand, which is just it's really convenient because it's about a 10-minute drive from Joe Polish's office. So,
I love the it's a nice one. I love the
and they have nice suites. They have nice suites. They're really big, roomy suites, and I mean, if you're complaining about a first world problem. You're not complaining about anything else.
That's the truth.
There's not much to complain about in most parts of our world. But anyway, we had a good time, and it was very informative. Tucker Max was there. Scott Hoffman. Do you know Scott Hoffman?
I do,
Agent. Very
was Reed there too?
And Reed was there. Reed Tracy was there, yes. And then Mansour Mohammed, the geneticist doctor, was there. That was terrific. And great conversations, full house, and we had a good time. What's there not to like when you're in a room with interesting people who have interesting things to talk about? And Ilko was there. So your cohort, your collaborator from
Amsterdam, right?
Yeah. So good.
Our American in Amsterdam.
I was talking to him about that again, and I think he's, I nudge him a little bit more, and I said, you were born an American. Maybe one of these days you'll actually come and stay for a while.
Ah, that's funny. Yeah, we'll see. He's over here a lot.
So, what's your thinking been up to since I talked to you last?
Well, I had an interesting experience the last couple of days. I heard, it's interesting where you hear and use a word often, and you have an understanding of what it is, but then when you get a real understanding of what it really is, it changes the way you think about that word. And I had that happen this week, and that word was solitude. Now, one of the things was I always think about solitude as being like, isolated and removing yourself from people and from, that kind of thing. But what I didn't really understand is the psychological importance of solitude from your brain, in that the way they described it was when you're alone with just your thoughts without the input of any other human with your brain, that is solitude. And you can get those moments. I think I've shared with you the times where I've gotten in the car, and instead of listening to the radio or listening to a podcast, I'll just drive in silence and think things through, or just have those kind of moments with yourself. Or if you go for a walk with solitude, and you start to think about why people talk about having their best ideas like in the shower, or they're traditionally always places where you're these brief moments of solitude that we have that allow our own thinking about something to come out, right? Because our brain's always going to be engaged thinking and entertaining itself. if you want to even think about it like that, it's always engaged in something. And when you're engaged with just your own thoughts, there's a big benefit of that. I think that's where our this general idea that when you just kind of ask yourself, okay, procrastination, what have you got for me? It's standing at the ready, always ready to let us know. There's a lot of stuff going on. We're just not kind of paying attention.
Yeah. It's interesting because I think just since I've talked to you last time, I completed my year without television. So I started on July 23rd of last year. And not with any intention in mind. It's just that Babs and I fell into a pattern starting in July of last year of really enjoying the weather for our evening meals. And so we just started to, have dinner out on one of our patios, and and we'd bring our Kindle along, so we'd chat, and then we'd read our Kindles. And usually it's in both of our cases, it's fiction. We're reading fiction, and our tastes are very different there. So she'll tell me the story that she's reading, and I'll tell her some of the insights I'm getting from the one that I'm doing. And then we got, we would go up to our cottage in late August, and we don't have a television there. And so probably by the time we got back after Labor Day, there had been 6 weeks now without television. And so the first of all, during the summer, there's not much new on because the series, which could be 13 or 26, the series where it could go from September through till March or April, or it starts, it could just be a fall series, or then you'd have to wait for a spring series. And I said, well, there's nothing on, so there's no point in getting involved right now. And then we were into October, and usually September is very busy. from a work standpoint. And so now we're 3 months down the road. And I said, oh, I wonder if I could do this for a whole year, just not watch television at all. Just,
right.
Kind of reflect, is there a difference in going a long period? And this would be the first period since I was 10 years old that I would go through a whole year. So that'd be 65 years since I've had a year when I didn't watch television. And so then, now you're locked in. And I says, okay, now this is a thing. And I got through. And I just going to tell you three things that I noticed. One is a year without television has left me feeling that the world's actually in better shape than I thought it was.
Ah, because you don't get the constant barrage of the world's falling apart.
Yeah, and I was less aware of imminent apocalypses at the end of the year than I was the year before, and I was probably missing a lot of disasters. I was missing a lot of outrageous behavior. I was probably missing how dare someone do this? How dare someone say this?
Yeah.
All the trends are looking bad right now. It looks like the economy, it's only a matter of time when the economy is going to collapse. And we have three experts who say we've reached the end of the line. The usual, the usual type of entertainment. And I was thinking about that when you were saying that if you're not watching the news, then your brain becomes more and more aware of the olds.
Of the what?
Olds. Well, if there's a thing called the news.
Oh, I see.
Then
the olds.
Then
that's funny.
I wonder what's on the olds today.
Oh man, that is the best.
Since I didn't have access to the news, my only possibility was a year of thinking about the olds, and there's some good olds that I've been, contemplating. I think it has to do with your concept of solitude, because I think when you have solitude, you're able to go back over some familiar territory that you may not have been paying attention to, or oldies but goodies that you've, in prior days you had enjoyment in thinking about these things, but you haven't done it recently. And then I went back over some, and I started seeing some patterns, and I could talk about one or two of those. But I've been talking to people about that, and they say, "Wow, I don't know anybody who hasn't gone, has gone that long without watching television." And I said, well, I don't either, but I don't know if it's a big thing or not, but it just seemed to me that I was in a better frame of mind as a reward for the experience.
Yeah. And that's, you think about that means you didn't see any 60 Minutes or any, of what you would maybe, I enjoy 60 Minutes. I like that a lot. But that's, I wonder, but now you, just in fairness to just to really truly define what that means, but you occasionally watch some series on Netflix or watch documentaries or, none of that, you're saying?
No, did not turn the TV on.
Okay, that changes everything. I thought you were watching some of these series. Yeah.
Now, just to temper this, I am a news junkie, so so you're in the morning. In the morning, still I get the local paper here in Toronto, the National Post, which we have four dailies in Toronto, which I think is a bit unusual in North America these days that you would have a city that has 4 dailies, and each of them are big dailies. I mean, and so I look at that, but I only look at usually the opinion page. It's got a financial section, and I'll look at the financial section. But even there, I'm looking at some essays, and then with front of the paper, they have the opinion page, and I'll look at if anything that's interesting. And then I'm very faithful with the Wall Street Journal. I like the Wall Street Journal, and I think the Saturday edition of the Wall Street Journal is now the best newspaper in the world.
Really different. Yeah. Than like the Sunday New York Times. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, yeah, and I would compare it to what I used to think was the best newspaper in the world, but my feeling is that the New York Times has become so one-sided in their political opinion since Trump was elected that I just find it really, really hard. And so I haven't read that. We get it every Sunday, but Babs reads it. I don't read it. But the review section of the Wall Street Journal each Saturday, and I was just going over it last night because I was in transit yesterday, so I didn't see it during the day. But they just have the most interesting articles, and the articles always take you by surprise because they're not geared to anything that's especially happening in the world right now. It's just really, it'll be a travel log about some place that I haven't really thought about, or it'll be a historical figure, or, it'll be, they had a front page article on, terrorism. Where does this terrorism come from? And has the notion of terrorism changed over time? And so it was like if you put it together, it was 3 full pages on telling the history of terrorism and how it changes with the times. It certainly changes with the methods. Who's doing it changes. And I was just sitting there and I said, I feel rewarded from reading through this. I just got a overview of something that I never had an overview of. So what my olds is, since I wasn't focusing on the news, was that I'm a reader.
Yeah.
That was my olds of how much of a reader I am, which was my first, real contact with the world when I was 6 years old. That if I knew how to read, I could investigate the world as a 6-year-old simply because I had acquired this new capability. And I was reminded over the last year that at 75, that habit that I learned when I was 6 is really very fundamental to me.
Reading is fundamental. Yeah, that's you mentioned about the one-sidedness of the New York Times. We've been watching right now on Netflix a series about the Fox News, about Roger Ailes, and the whole building of that with Rupert Murdoch. And it's interesting to see the backstory of that. All the how instrumental they were. I mean, in their writing of the history of it or whatever in Donald Trump, and definitely they were kind of the first to wear their one-sidedness on their sleeve, kind of thing, to be an opinion leader, or opinion news, as opposed to journalistic.
It changed. I mean, the cable news, was started by CNN. Really, if you go back, they were the only cable station, and they were the only one who gave you the news on the hour and the half hour on television. For the first 50 years of my life, I guess.
Wait till 6 o'clock.
50. Yeah, well, 6 o'clock, or you had the morning news. There would be the morning news. There might be the noon news, but then it would be 6 o'clock was really when everybody stopped and for an hour watched, and you had your favorite
evening news. Yeah,
it was either Walter Cronkite or it was Huntley and Brinkley, or it was. They had three competing networks who did that, but. Going back to Solitude, which was your framework, it's not a greatly practiced skill these days.
No. And apparently it's a rather important skill, or not important skill, but an important element of our brain. Like needs it to sort things, to get all of this, and especially when combined with walking, it's one of the things that kind of balances the hemispheres of our brains, and stuff beyond what I really understand, but that physiologically or whatever, and neurologically, it's important that we have solitude. I think I mentioned to you that when I do that, when I get in the car and drive without a podcast or any input, that I do notice my brain feels soothed. Like my brain feels relaxed. And maybe, it's because it's quiet in the car, you're alone. But it's something. It's almost like soothing, like a brain massage, like a dip in a hot tub or something, for your brain.
Well, do you notice kind of a contrast between Dean Jackson when he's actually got solitude and Dean Jackson when he's kind of your time is used up with busyness, let's say busyness, where you're interacting a lot with other people and you have projects that you're working on and you're in teamwork with other people. And what happens to you, in other words, is there kind of a comparison here that you could measure one situation where you haven't had a lot of solitude, and then now you just had the experience probably over the last month when you did have solitude. So how are you different between those two states?
I get it. So where I look at it, like I find what we're doing right now energizing. That when we hang up the phone, even if you're thinking, like if I come into something lower energy or lower, mentally different. I've been, since I got back, I've been having like an allergy situation coming back here. So I took some Claritin and Aleve, so my brain or my had like a sort of tension headache kind of thing. But I noticed that when I get on the phone and we're talking and my brain's being stimulated and we're, thinking, and it's not just taking something in, we're actively participating in the conversation. That is that's stimulating. It feels good, energizing. But I also notice that when I'm alone or in solitude without outside input, that is also rejuvenating. But where there's a lot of time in coasting where you're, you get caught up in just mindless, input for just that there's stuff going on, right? Like watching something on TV or watching something online, or going through the social media loop or news sites or whatever, always like looking for input that are that is probably leaves the most draining.
Yeah.
If I look at it like that's the activity that probably is the most draining.
Yeah, I find, I think both of us, if I could kind of talk about how we go about things, is that I have over the years, and I think it's a reaction to being in situations where there's a lot of talking going on, but it doesn't seem to have any point to it, doesn't seem to have any context to it, doesn't seem to have any organization or structure to it. I really get worn out by that. I notice that I'm really, because I think I have kind of an organizing brain, and my brain is not having any success for like a period of time. Maybe it's an hour or 2 hours. And and when I can take raw material of words or ideas or thoughts and I can put a new structure to it, I find that very, very rewarding. It feels very, very good. But if the situation kind of defeats me, like I'm, I don't have good raw material to work with. I don't really have good raw material to work with. Then I get really, really tired out. And then I have to be off by myself. And first of all, I'm a bit ticked off about it. Like I've been assaulted.
Right.
And it's kind of like, doesn't the world know how my brain works? Why isn't it providing me raw material in a useful form so that I can actually do something useful with it, And the solitude thing, I hadn't actually used that, word. But I think that the world, which puts a high premium on connectedness, simply because the connecting capabilities have a lot of dollars attached to them. So I think that if there's an activity that has a lot of new money attached to it, you're told that you are more virtuous and useful as a human being if you're contributing to the cash flow than if you're withdrawing yourself from that activity. It's almost like you're being a slacker. You're not contributing to the general welfare if you're not taking part in this. And I think people are discouraged from being off by themselves. And I don't think
for even a minute. For even a minute. I mean, we can't even go. You don't want to go anywhere without your phone. Like, I mean, people will panic to get in the car or to go somewhere without your phone.
Well, you gave that really striking example on one of our podcasts, and a lot of people have actually talked to me about your telling the story of a friend who was on the lake with you, but on the other side of the lake, who came to your house for an evening and then discovered that he had left his cell phone at home and promptly left and walked around the lake, got his cell phone, and came back because he was out of sorts by the fact that even though he was coming over to visit with you, that was only half the truth. He was coming over to visit with you with a friend, and he forgot the friend, so he had to go back and get back. And he only felt like half a person, until he went back and retrieved his friends, and then he could be a full person when he came back. But that's a sign of that not being, not being comfortable with being disconnected.
Yeah. And that's the thing where I think what's really changed is the cadence and the frequency of the inputs. I was thinking about that when you just mentioned like 75 this year, and I know that you are 22 years older than me. So if I go back 22 years to 1997, for you, you were 53 years old.
53, yeah. 53, yeah.
Yeah, just what I am right now. And, do you recall kind of the slice of life or day in the life or the regular sort of routine of Dan Sullivan circa 1997? How much of it has changed, or what was kind of your routine then?
No, I don't think, generally speaking, there's two parts of my life. There would be the work part of my life and the non-work part of my life. And even in 97, I still had my routines. For example, the Saturday routine, I was either at Jacques Bistro or I was at La Select. So that would go easily back to 1997. And then I had my work life. And I would say the one thing that would be constant would be that I was in my workshop cycle, but my workshop cycles were every month in those days. Like every month I was doing a whole number of workshops, and that has now become 8 months. So there's 4 months when I'm not in my workshop cycle. And the other thing is 3 other cycles have been added from a work standpoint. There's the podcast cycle that I'm doing podcasts now, was not doing that. As a matter of fact, in 1997, nobody was doing podcasts.
That's true.
And so that's a new one. The other thing is I have my video cycle. And again, in 1997, nobody was doing videos to be able to place them immediately digitally on the internet. So that's a new cycle. And the other one is my monthly or my quarterly book cycle. And there again, I don't think anyone was doing a book cycle in such a way that a new book could come out every quarter. So I've added 3 what I would call capability cycles. I still have my workshops, new workshop for new quarters. So very interesting. I hadn't thought about that, but in fact, my work cycle, which is quarterly, has become more filled with productive activities that have a much greater multiplier impact at 75 than I had at 53.
53.
Yeah, so I'm incredibly more productive. But I would say this, that I think that I'm actually taking more time by myself at 75 than I would at 53. So when I'm at the cottage, which is like 5 weeks out of the summer, I have nothing going on from a sound standpoint. There's just
no podcast, nothing.
And I'm like you are. I'm an introvert. I'm perfectly happy to spend time with myself. I can keep myself completely entertained and completely interested in all sorts of thinking activities by myself. I don't require other people. So. Yeah, and I have to tell you, unless there's some new dynamite, some absolutely revolutionary breakthrough productivity capability that comes up in the next 25 years, I can see that the pattern I have right now will be constant for the next 25 years.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
I'm pretty happy. I mean, I'm very happy with it right now. I'm feeling very content. I'm very, very, very content with the structure of my life.
But you had your underlying structure too was really already in place then as well, right? Like you weren't driving then. You were with Benjamin then too, right? And you weren't.
Mm-hmm.
I think before then you had the idea of not doing any more at home than you would do if you lived at the Four Seasons.
Yeah, that was already in place. That had been in place for 10 years already.
Yeah, right. And that's a good foundation to come from. I mean, yeah.
I mean, that's really the essential one. I mean, that goes back.
Yeah.
And the other thing that was not true 22 years ago is that I didn't know you.
We had just met, I think, at that point.
But
just then, but not. We didn't know each other. We didn't have a relationship.
I think fleetingly. I think that we were.
Yes.
I think we might have been a ricochet, but we weren't fully involved.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, and that's. I mean, I look at that. 1997. I had just moved to Florida, and it was really at a time when the internet was just kind of getting started, and I remember really well, getting up, when AOL, America Online, was kind of blanketing the country with these floppy disks, to get everybody online. And I remember I do remember those times when it was like a distraction, like a diversion from the real world in the evenings kind of thing. Like, instead of television, you'd go check out America Online, maybe for a couple of hours or whatever. But the main world was definitely the mainland. That was really the things. And I just, it is definitely relaxing when you opt out of the constant frequency. Like that is, I've noticed when I've gone through periods where I've had my email delivered once a day, and that's an interesting thing, because there's nothing saying that you can't do that. I was experimenting for a while with having a daily digest sent of just the emails that I need to see, and having them arrive at 6 p.m. And what you really realize is how little email I get that really requires any input from me.
Mm-hmm.
And yet we're constantly amused by or engaged by the email loop, the checking of the email.
Yeah. Well,
it's a hard habit to break.
While you were talking, I went to Google here and I looked up Solitude. Okay.
Yes.
And it's very, very interesting that the synonyms that are given, because when definitions require a great deal of other words to kind of zero in on you. There's no, absolutely 100% definition of anything in language, but we have to kind of
use other words. Yeah,
use other words to do that, and it's really interesting. So I'm just going to read a series of words to you, And it's kind of interesting. So synonyms: loneliness, solitariness, remoteness, isolation, seclusion, retirement, withdrawal. Perda, I don't know what that means, so I have to look that up. Privacy, privateness, peace and quiet, desolation. And they have more here.
But you know what is striking about all of those words? All of those words are describing what solitude is from the outside looking in.
Yeah. Well, maybe peace and quiet.
Right?
Yeah. Maybe peace and quiet.
Yeah, and loneliness, I guess. But
desolation, lonesomeness, rare sequestration. Sequestration means to reclusion and everything else. But it's kind of interesting. It's there's an overall, I would say, if you take all the words together, the general impression is of
a punishment,
oddness, or unusualness, or strangezness.
An unfortunate situation that somebody's thrust into.
And then there's a secondary meaning here: a lonely or uninhabited place. Okay, wilderness, undisturbed area, unspoiled area, rural area, wilds, backwoods, the back of beyond. That's a fearsome place, the back of beyond. You don't want to get caught in the back of beyond. Desert, emptiness, wasteland, no man's land, the bush, the outback, backcountry, backyard, the sticks, the middle of nowhere, informal, the boondocks, Hicksville.
Isn't it something? Really?
Yeah.
It's not painted as a positive thing.
What about the greatest place I've ever been?
But what about, there it is. How about Superman? Superman, the fortress of solitude.
Where all the excitement starts,
Yes.
So it's interesting. Well, no wonder people are warned off of going, of being even for a minute, being not connected. It's a terrible place there. It's like in medieval times, the forest. You don't want to catch yourself in the forest. Bad things happen in the forest. But that's a really interesting thing that I think that a definition in the dictionary in the year 2019 reflects a social judgment. It's kind of a social judgment that's coming across with all these different definitions of solitude, and yet I never feel, I never feel that I'm actually cut off from anything by being by myself.
No, I don't either, and that's part of. I actually, I strive for more of it. Actually, there's a balance, I'm sure, but I think it's like it requires it's definitely going against the grain in a way. It's not, you have to consciously carve out periods of solitude, seek them out, because we're definitely not, our world's not engineered to grant them as a default state.
Well, actually, it's very, very interesting because I've been reading articles. So the one thing I have to put in there as a context explanation of my year away from television, I have been fully engaged with the internet every day. But I'm an article reader on the internet. Like, I don't go on the internet to watch videos. I go on the internet to come across articles. I'm an article reader, and articles are a great thing because they're not books, in other words, and they're not essays either. Articles are short. Essay is something that in my mind is something longer, but article could be, it takes you a minute or 2 minutes to read it, but it's not a, it's not a 15-second, I'm here and we've, and this has just happened, and the implications of this are tremendous, and now let's check in on the weather, Yeah. So it's not a sudden flash or a blurb or anything like that. So I think the world has really reduced itself to these little bursts of information. And I like the articles because I can sit there, for an hour, for not an hour, but maybe sometimes 4 or 5 minutes, and actually think through someone's more organized analysis of something that just happened, and this kind of connects to this, and this kind of connects to this, and everything else. But one of the things I was thinking about, they were talking about the shooters, because you had the 2 shooting incidents, one in Texas and one in Ohio, over the last, I think it was Thursday of last week, not this past Thursday, but the Thursday before. And they were saying that one of the things you have to really watch out for is individuals who spend time by themselves.
Mm-hmm. Gotta watch out for that, Dan.
Like Mr. Jackson. Like Mr. Jackson. In Orlando, there's this person named Mr. Jackson, and he better put him on the watch list, because he spends time by himself.
Yeah. I wonder what the balance is. I'm anxiously. I'm really going to.
Well, the question is, he's spending time by himself, but now you know exactly nothing. Having said that, you know exactly nothing. The question is, what's he thinking about when he's by himself? I mean, that's
right.
That's a whole different description. That's a whole different, consideration. Like when I'm by myself, I'm really, really doing very enjoyable thinking.
Yes, me too. Yeah, me too. I quite enjoy it. That's the thing. I wonder what the right balance is of, how much solitude. I don't think it would be like I can't say that I've ever had a time where I've gone, like full days at a time with no interaction. So I don't know whether I would enjoy that. I've had friends who've done silent retreats, like have gone, to a place where, funny enough, people gather to be silent. Yeah.
Yeah.
Seems counterintuitive, but they gather. It's organized for being silent, and
I wouldn't be attracted to that personally.
You would, yeah.
No, I would not.
No, not being with others, but you get that at your cottage. You do that basically.
Yeah. I mean, I mean, the whole point is, and we can bring up, like I've gone. I remember last summer was unusual because Babs had a sister who was very sick, and a 4-day period and a 3-day period, she went away, and that's extraordinarily unusual.
Mm-hmm.
That Babs and I would spend time apart. For like that. Now, the thing is that for the first time, I was given an opportunity to learn how to text.
Right.
And as a result of these 2 periods, 3 days and 4 days, I became quite a good texter. The only thing is that my text would be interpreted as a literary form because there are complete paragraphs, complete sentences, and then I started really getting useful in putting 5 or 6 emojis together.
Wow!
As a complete thought form. It's like watching cuneiform. Egyptian cuneiform on the side, because I was trying to think, how do I put together a complete sentence here just using emojis and everything? Yeah. But I have to tell you, since that period, I've never sent another text. It was just that this was going to be a form of communication between us, because her schedule wasn't all that set. She had to be here.
Right.
She had to do that, and so the only solid way of communicating with her was to leave text, and then wait for the return text and everything. But meanwhile, I wasn't seeing anyone else during that 3-day period.
Right.
I was here, I was around, and there was nobody I had in mind that I might give them a call or, hey, let's go out for lunch or go out for dinner and everything else. And as a matter of fact, I think I may have done a podcast with you during that one of the at least the 4-day period. I think I may have done a podcast with you. So that sort of that's not solitude. But the thing is that if I'm going to be talking to someone during a period of solitude, in other words, it's going to be broken. I want it to be, high quality.
Yes. Yeah, I agree. This is the thing. I was just texting with Jeff Walker before I got on the phone with you here, and we were making arrangements to get together, because that's left a big void in my life too. Is, for almost 8 years, I think we were, because Jeff and I, of course, were in the very first group of your new workshop that's evolved and now become the Game Changer. But Jeff and I were friends before that, but we were sat together for all those years, every quarter, and we would always get together the day before, the evening before, and that was something that we really both looked forward to, because he's one of my favorite people to, exchange ideas with and have great conversations. And we were just texting this morning that that's the big void in the things, is since, I haven't seen him in, I saw him in January, but that sort of the regularity of seeing him. So we're gonna spend a couple of days together coming up here. So I'm really looking forward to that. But it is interesting how you elevate the level.
Well, just send Jeff a text that a $50,000 check to Strategic Coach will immediately solve that problem going into the future.
It really could. You're absolutely right. And it would solve his crossing the border program or problem. Yeah. He just has to come to Chicago now.
Then there's no there's no need for it. Anyway, I mean, it's really interesting, and one of the things I noticed, I was doing some reflection on 75. What really changes at 75. And it's a more and more, I would say, a demand for quality regarding my time. That I want to be connected. I want to be interactive. I want to be, I certainly want to have a lot of communication, but standards have really, really gone up. I really noticed my standards have really gone up in terms of, And what I noticed, I think why the television thing was so interesting is that I believe that other mediums have taken away all the quality that used to be found on television. Television
used to be the highest quality, right?
Yeah, television's become pretty threadbare. It's simply quantity that it's quantity to fill up the available time. It has nothing to do with quality. And I was just looking at just the speaking quality of news commentators going back 50 years compared to today. Now they're nervous that they're going to get cut off after 10 seconds, whereas Walter Cronkite could literally deliver a monologue for 5 minutes or 10 minutes. His choice.
Yeah.
I mean, his choice. He could do this, and he'd get cut off in a minute. Just a minute, Walter. We got something here. Sorry, Walter. We've got a flash coming in now from from some out of the way place, that has more fear factor than you're currently delivering. And we know our advertisers are saying, we're not getting the hits that we need out of your monologue. So can we cut your monologue a bit short here? So I think that the television has become utterly commoditized. In other words, it's a race towards the bottom in terms of actual context. There's no context.
Yeah.
There's just sheer competing content. There's no context.
Well, I think the big thing that really that summed it up was you remember we've mentioned that article in the New York Times about tyranny of convenience, and how now with streaming and on demand, the demands of television to be in front of your TV at a certain time seem silly and a little bit undignified. Which you've got to be there at 6 o'clock to get the news, when meanwhile it's been tweeted the instant it's happening, and by 6 o'clock it's like yesterday's headlines that you're hearing on the 6 o'clock news.
Well, it's
There's no
archaic.
Breaking news. Yeah, that's what it is.
It's kind of archaic, It's got an archaic feeling with it, And and I think that's really interesting, And but my feeling is that there's nothing strange about it. My comment to Peter Tiamanis, and we have a disagreement about what the most disruptive force in the world is, and he thinks it's technology. And I says, well, I don't think it is. I think it's actually unpredictable consumers with a new capability that's the disruptive force. In other words, that new capabilities are being presented to people who want to consume things, and all of a sudden they'll come across one that everybody piles in. They just love it, and immediately that shift of consumer attention and consumer consumption just to one new capability immediately disrupts all the usual processes and structures that everybody thought were sure things.
Yeah. How did Peter's virtual event go?
No, that's next. I think it's next April.
Okay. I thought it already.
No, he's just getting ready to talk about it.
I think he was just at one that was.
Yeah. No, he did it to experience what it was like.
Right. Somebody else had one. Right. Yeah.
Get a handle on it, and yeah, I'm in two minds about that. I mean, I might go just to see what it's like, but I'm a homeland guy.
The mainland, yeah.
Mainland. I'm a mainland. More and more.
Yeah.
I was just thinking. I was 2 days at Genius Network. Where you're in a room for 2 days and evenings out with a discrete number of human beings, and I like the experience. I like the.
Yeah.
I mean, what we're doing right now is a nice combination of the two.
Yeah.
I don't like all one, and I don't like all the other. I like I like a creative blend of the two. Actually, I like the creative blend of the two. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, where's Solitude sitting with you now at the end of this hour? Because you have.
Well, here's my Solitude. I'm gonna experiment with a Solitude practice this week. I'm gonna really be intentional about my solitude and do some experimenting with that, because I do notice that all the good things happen from solitude, and I think that I'm going to find periods of solitude. I'm going to experiment with the different amounts of it, because it is. I don't think I've ever had like a full multi-day period of solitude, where without getting sucked into the I definitely could, but then I end up watching something or reading something online or going getting sucked into Cloudlandia for it. But the distinction in the definition that stood out for me this time was the absence of input from another human brain.
Yes.
And that's an interesting thing, that it's just me and my own thoughts kind of engaging with each other, not looking or listening or reading someone else's thoughts. It's
interacting with your own thoughts.
Yeah.
Interacting with your own thoughts. Yeah.
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 Well, it'll be interesting, because my feeling is that real creativity, now that I've had 75 years, probably not 75, but certainly 65 years to think about this, is that it's your okayness, in other words, your comfort level with being able to interact with your own thoughts in a creative way. I'm leading towards the word creative here, but interacting with your own thoughts in an enjoyable, and the other thing, a productive way, which actually is the basis for all creativity.
Yes. So that's it. I think that's going to be my. I think it would be a really interesting thing to kind of dial in and see what the right, like trying. How does 30 minutes of solitude feel, or how does though even 10 minutes of solitude makes can make a difference. Yeah, one Jackson of solitude.
One Jackson of solitude. Yeah,
definitely makes you can get clarity on one thing. That's how long it takes me to do my my procrastination check-in.
Yeah,
because it just takes me 10 minutes to say, okay, procrastination, what have you got for me? And I can list out the things and pick the 3, which has been very useful, actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I think, we have to come up with an opposite term to a Jackson, because a Jackson is a fully utilized 10 minutes. We got to come up with It would be we could call it a Manson.
A Manson. Oh my goodness.
you do not want to be around when Charles Manson's spending 10 minutes thinking about his own thoughts.
Well, I've been thinking about. This was an interesting thing. I've been thinking about like logging just as an awareness activity. What I've been calling, red light, green light, yellow light. Activities for my 10 minutes at a time, kind of seeing how much of that time is counterproductive. Like you're saying, you're absolutely right. Like 10 minutes in solitude with intention is 100% green light. Six Jacksons recording a conversation with Dan Sullivan is a green light.
Yeah.
But 6 units, watching, parkour fail videos on YouTube is counterproductive.
That's a red light. Yeah.
Exactly.
Because this past week was the 50th anniversary of the Manson murders in California, and one of the women is still in prison. One or two of them, and the interesting thing is that she's been a model prisoner for 48 years, or 49 years. She's been a model prisoner, and she hasn't there is no possibility that she's ever going to be released, even though she's been absolutely a model prisoner for 49 years. And the reason is every time she comes up for parole, she's been up for parole for 3 times now. Yeah. And the whole media just replays all the horror, what got her put in prison in the first place. And they said, no way did we ever want this person to be back on the street.
Wow.
So anyway,
did you see the movie, by the way?
No, I'm not really,
Yeah.
I have a sensitive soul, I can't unsee things once I've seen them. I don't have the ability to unsee something bad. So I got to be very, very careful what I allow into my visual imagination.
Good for you.
Yeah. It wasn't 60 Minutes of Solitude, but but it was very interesting to see how generally the definitions or the synonyms that go along with solitude are generally negative, I would say. Yeah, like this is something that unfortunately happens. It's thrust upon you somehow as a bad thing. Yeah. It certainly isn't something to seek out. We could probably develop this along the lines of procrastination, because I was just thinking the same thing. It's like procrastination, as the world goes, is a totally negative thing, and yet we found gold mines inside. I think we're going to find gold in solitude. Yes, this is a mother lode of another mineral. I love it. Okay. Okay, Dan. Thanks. I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.